Chapter 5: Exit as Stewardship. A stewardship economy cannot be built on the assumption that most builders will voluntarily become stewards. That assumption is psychologically comforting, but it is not structurally serious. Many high-capacity individuals are not motivated by communal obligation. They are motivated by comfort, status, accumulation, and private consumption. Some are generous, but many are indifferent. Some feel responsibility, but many feel only entitlement to enjoy what they have earned. A society cannot base its moral survival on the hope that excellence will naturally mature into care. This is the hard constraint that any post-Rand ethic must face. The problem is not merely that vulnerable people exist. The problem is that the number of people who need help will always exceed the number of people who freely want to give it. And if the only answer is coercion, taxation as moral enforcement, then stewardship collapses back into the very dynamic Rand feared. Virtue administered through the state, compassion converted into obligation, and moral language weaponized by opportunists. The solution cannot be to demand that all builders become saints. It must be to design systems that do not require sainthood. This is why stewardship must be opt-in and architectural rather than moralistic. The goal is not to guilt or force the successful into sacrifice, but to create a parallel attractor, a way of life that draws the minority of builders who already seek something beyond consumption. Such people have always existed. They are not the majority, but they are real. They want coherence, legacy, belonging, and meaning. They want to build something that deserves to exist. A stewardship economy begins with that minority, not because the minority is sufficient to carry infinite need, but because the minority is sufficient to seed functioning nodes. The mistake is to imagine stewardship as endless giving. The true engine of stewardship is rehabilitation and reintegration. A serious system cannot treat human need as a permanent category. It must treat dysfunction as, in many cases, a solvable engineering problem. Stabilize, train, restore capacity, and return people to contribution wherever possible. The aim is not a dependent class supported forever by a virtuous elite. The aim is a community that converts suffering into agency over time. This is also why the orphan problem is central. The deepest moral failure of both Rand's withdrawal and bureaucratic collectivism is abandonment. People who fall outside the circle of family, competence, or market value, and are left without advocates. Stewardship addresses this not through abstract redistribution, but through surrogate kin institutions, local covenant structures that ensure no one is socially unclaimed. The community becomes the missing family for those without one, not through unlimited subsidy, but through bounded belonging. Stewardship, then, is not imposed. It is chosen, and it must be designed so that choosing it is not synonymous with self-erasure. Builders will not opt into a system that treats them as fuel. They will opt into a system that protects excellence from exploitation while offering a richer form of life than private hoarding can provide. Stewardship must be attractive, competent, transparent, bounded, and culturally honorable. It must not feel like punishment for success, but rather the highest use of success. This is the bridge beyond Rand. Her builders exit into isolation because they see only two options: be looted or disappear. Stewardship proposes a third option: exit from captured systems into constructive parallelism. Stewardship communities that remain voluntary, resilient against parasites, protective of orphans, and capable of replication without coercion. The world cannot be saved by altruism alone because altruism is unevenly distributed and easily exploited. It can only be saved by institutions that do not require universal goodness, by architectures that channel the commitments of the willing into durable structures of repair, and by federated communities that scale not through domination, but through example. Stewardship is not the demand that everyone care. It is the design of a world where enough people can choose to care, and where that choice becomes civilization rather than charity. One of Rand's deepest psychological insights is that participation in a corrupt system can become complicity. When institutions are captured, when moral language is weaponized, when bureaucracy rewards dependence and punishes competence, withdrawal begins to feel like the only remaining form of integrity. In this sense, Rand's call to stop feeding the machine is not mere selfishness. It is a protest against predation disguised as virtue. Stewardship does not reject this impulse. It refines it. The question is not whether builders are justified in refusing exploitation. They are. The question is what form withdrawal should take. Rand imagines exit as secession, the competent disappearing into a private enclave while the rest of society collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. The moral cost of that vision is the orphan left behind. Collapse is not a lesson administered only to looters. It is a biological event that punishes innocence first. A stewardship ethic therefore affirms exit, but redirects it. The alternative is not retreat into isolation. It is exit into construction, the deliberate diversion of capital, competence, and energy away from captured systems and into parallel, accountable infrastructure. This is not abandonment. It is institutional entrepreneurship. Builders who refuse to subsidize corruption need not withdraw into hidden valleys. They can withdraw by building cooperative enterprises, community land trusts, apprenticeship pipelines, mutual insurance structures, local food systems, and capacity restoration institutions that operate transparently and voluntarily. The goal is not to starve society, but to deprive predatory systems of dependency while creating replacements that cannot be easily captured. This approach also begins with an honest recognition. The welfare state, as currently structured, is incredibly inefficient and ineffective at rehabilitation. Large-scale transfer systems can generate perverse incentives, administrative waste, and political exploitation. Government accountability agencies routinely document improper payments across major federal programs, reflecting the inevitable leakage that accompanies scale and complexity. Moreover, public trust erodes when citizens perceive that systems intended for protection become vehicles for rent extraction. This is not merely a right-wing fantasy. It is an institutional design problem. Complexity invites capture, and moral rhetoric can become cover for selective advantage. Stewardship therefore agrees with Rand's strongest warning. Compassion administered through unaccountable bureaucracy becomes a magnet for parasites. But stewardship refuses Rand's conclusion that the only defense is withdrawal from responsibility itself. The answer is not coerced sacrifice, and it is not heroic abandonment. It is voluntary parallelism. Builders choosing to exit corrupt channels while remaining in covenant with the vulnerable through institutions designed with anti-capture constraints. Local governance, transparency, bounded support, rehabilitation over permanent dependency, and ownership structures that prevent oligarchy. This is the crossroads we currently face. Exit is justified. The strike against corruption is real, but the moral evolution is to strike by building, to redirect resources away from captured systems and into distributed stewardship economies where competence is honored, exploitation is constrained, and no one is left socially unclaimed. Withdrawal, in its mature form, is not disappearance. It is reconstruction.